You've been watching the live proceedings out in the North Gauteng High Court, where the defense has been giving the closing arguments. In our top story this hour, defense advocate Barry Roo has appealed to Judge Thokozile Masipa, not convicted of client Oscar Pistorius of murder, rather. In his closing arguments, Roo said that his client's actions were reasonable in the circumstances. The defense says the state is desperate to nail Oscar Pistorius. Roo criticized the state for portraying murder-accused Oscar Pistorius as a liar. In its closing argument, it questioned why the state failed to call several key witnesses who were among the first at the crime scene. Advocate Barry Roo has also asked the North Gauteng High Court not to ignore the fact that police tampered with evidence. He also accused the state of deliberately ignoring important evidence in the case.
Mr. Nell spoke about Professor Derman, and he calls him a self-proclaimed expert. That's extremely unfair. He's highly qualified. He is the most qualified person in the country. Whatever he was saying to the court, he backed up with research, with authoritative articles, publications, on that very point. He was not saying something because they say, that's what I'm thinking. He says, what I'm saying to you is also in research. But it's more than that. Then Mr. Nell says to you, and you know, how can you depend on someone's evidence where his memory was fuzzy? He did not say his evidence was fuzzy. He says it was a bit fuzzy on the reaction to the second startle. He couldn't remember that. What was his reaction to the second startle? Because that was not as important. His evidence was not fuzzy in general. And in any event, not fuzzy, but he says, on that, I'm a bit fuzzy. He explains, he says, I just cannot remember it. I'm thinking back and blame him for not keeping notes. That I understand. That I understand, but that does not mean that he's not highly qualified and that he was not absolutely, whatever he was saying to the court, was corroborated by research. But what's more important, then he gets blamed. He says, where's that part? He gets blamed and says, you, come and tell us you're an expert. Why did you not investigate that third startle? This magazine rack, why did you not investigate it? Let's look at the real evidence. And let me immediately say something. I don't know if the deceased, when the accused was sleeping, felt hungry for something and had something to eat. Because I don't know, the state says the alarm was not activated, then it was activated. And she stayed in that house before. She was at afternoon in that house. So we can't say that she didn't have a clue about the alarm system. I don't know that, so I can't exclude that. It's open. Of course, in that respect, the accused might have had something to eat, but that doesn't assist the state, because that does not mean that they were sitting down, as suggested by the state, in the kitchen and having dinner at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then started to fight, and which led to this. I simply don't know that factor. And I've given it a lot of thought, my lady. I just don't know. That's a possibility. But what I do know is if I leave that aside for the moment, and I look at the objective facts, and I say, let's just test probabilities. And again, with that one point, that's still hanging there, because that point does not offend probabilities that I'm going to give to you. Let's look at the accused. He came home, unchallenged, about 6 o'clock. The deceased was busy preparing food, stir-fried chicken. That we know. He says between 7 and 8, we had dinner. We know one thing, he was absolutely active on his electronic equipment.
All right, before we go for a live wrap of today's closing arguments proceedings, let's just take a look at some of the points that, of course, that came out of the defense's arguments today. The defense in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial have argued that Oscar shot using primal instincts because he feels more vulnerable due to his disability. The defense advocate Barry Rue has dealt with each of the so-called baker's dozen of problems highlighted by the state in closing arguments at the Oscar Pistorius trial, of course, going on at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. The defense has also criticized the state for portraying murder-accused Oscar Pistorius as a liar. And in these closing arguments, the defense also questioned why the state had failed to call several key witnesses who were among the first at the crime scene. And that's, of course, in relation to the police that have been accused of tampering with the defense's evidence. And, of course, what also came out this morning was a picture that Mr. Barry Rue claimed that, of course, the defense did not have it. It was in the state's possession. He also accused the state of deliberately ignoring important evidence in the case. Rue described Chief Prosecutor Gerrie Nel as very desperate. And finally, he said that Nel failed to prove that Pistorius was guilty of premeditated murder. Pistorius is accused of 4 charges, including shooting and killing his girlfriend, River Steenkamp, out in Pretoria on August 2014. All right, now for a wrap of the defense's closing arguments, we are joined from right outside the North Gauteng High Court by our reporter, Patricia Visagie. Patricia, a very good afternoon to you. Please take us through some of the defense's critical points in their closing arguments. Now, today I know Mr. Rue went into great lengths in terms of disputing the state's version, went as far as showing the picture taken at the crime scene that was allegedly never made available to the defense.
Well, Alicia, good afternoon to you, of course, and to our viewers out there. It certainly has been a hectic day today here at the North Gauteng High Court as the defense, tried their last attempt to try to fight for the Paralympian Oscar Pistorius's freedom. Today, we saw Advocate Barry Rue going at great length, really focusing on each and every little detail in the state's case against the Paralympian. But before I continue, let's just look at what's happening there at the exit of the court. You can see a picture there of the Paralympian making his way to his vehicle, going home, of course, after his legal team put up a fierce fight in court today, trying to obviously, keep him from a possible jail sentence. But I'm sure you have seen throughout the day. It has been a hectic day in court today. Advocate Barry Rue really focusing on each and every little detail that the state prosecutor, Advocate Nel, focused on in his closing arguments yesterday. Him scrutinizing every detail, trying to discredit the state's case, but really him highlighting the one point which we knew the defense would actually focus on, and that being, the allegations of police not following proper procedure when collecting, processing, and storing key forensic evidence, and him again touching on the defense's, allegations that the police tampered with the crime scene and ultimately contaminated some key evidence that was, used by the state in its case against the Paralympian. We also heard, words coming out in this case today as Advocate Barry Rue really delved into his closing arguments, calling the state prosecutor desperate and naughty, saying that Advocate Nel really became obsessed with trying to nail the Paralympian and incriminating him as far as possible. He touched on various details throughout his closing arguments.
How did the Steenkamp family react to these arguments? And Oscar, how is he coping at this point?
Well, we saw the Paralympian really sitting very focused and, listening attentively to his advocate fighting for his freedom today in court. And you would know, since yesterday, for the first time, his father, Hank Pistorius, is also seen in court. Hank was here yesterday. He came today as well to come and support his son. And, we also saw the father of the deceased, the father of Riva Steenkamp, and that is Barry Steenkamp, also being here for the first time. He was here yesterday and today. So it seems like both families, obviously, they have to put up a brave face. They have to really, keep strong and hope for the best from both sides, of course.
All right. Now, what can we expect when the court resumes, Patricia?
Of course, when we come back, as Judge Thokozile Masipa has already made it clear that the court will come back on the 11th of September. We will be expecting judgment then, and then she will be laying out the fate of the Paralympian, and we will know whether he is guilty or not. You would know that today, one of the points that Advocate Barry Roux touched on repeatedly was to tell the court that there is not sufficient evidence provided by the state to, convict the Paralympian on a murder charge, basically to go by what the state has called dolus eventualis in this case. He said that by so far he feels that the court should rather consider, a conviction on culpable homicide. So we do expect that Judge Thokozile Masipa and her assessors will be focusing on those details. And just again, let's see Oscar Pistorius' family, and there at the back you would see Advocate Barry Roux following Oscar Pistorius' family, making their way out of the North Gauteng High Court after the closing arguments by the defense team were presented today. You can see them making their way to their vehicle. And right there you see Oscar's father, and that is Hank Pistorius, making his way out. And as I have mentioned earlier, yesterday and today were the first time since the bail application that we've actually seen Oscar's father making it to the trial, coming to support his son. So that already tells you that, everybody is hoping for the best, that even his father, who we've repeatedly seen, cutting a lone figure, not really being so close to the rest of the family, but he came nevertheless to come and support his son in this difficult time.
Thank you so much. That's Patricia Visagie, our reporter, live to us from the North Gauteng High Court, where the defense in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial presented its closing arguments. The trial will now wait for judgment day, and that murder actually took place in February 2013.